Welcome to the March 22nd, 2016 meeting of the Palos Verdes Estates City Council. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. And at the conclusion of the pledge, I'd like us to remain standing for just one moment of silence to remember the victims in Belgium and their families. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Peterson.
Here.
Councilmember Ray.
Here.
Councilmember Goodhart.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Vandiver.
Here.
Mayor King.
Here.
Thank you.
Approval of the agenda. And I actually have one suggestion because we do have a representative here from David Hadley's office, so I would suggest switching items 8 and 9.
I'll make a motion to do that.
So it's to approve the agenda as amended.
Approve the agenda as amended. Thank you.
I'd second.
I'm glad you're here.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Mayor's report, matters of community interest. I just wanted to inform the public of 2 items that are coming up. One is the Citizens Academy, and I know we spoke about this last night. This is a new program, and it's an opportunity for our residents to learn about the city, either in preparation for potentially becoming more involved or just as a matter of interest. It's a multi-month program, and students or participants will be learning all aspects of the city, including fire and safety, planning, history, yes. And so those applications are due on April 8th, and we already have several applicants. It's a maximum of 25, and we're looking very forward to that program. The other upcoming event is the Energy and Environment Expo, and that's on Saturday, April 23rd in front of City Hall, and that will involve a number of booths and information about sustainability and handling the drought and being green and anything to do with the environment. And it was a great success last year. This is our 2nd annual, and we're looking forward to a successful expo. Before we proceed to the consent agenda, I just wanted to remind everyone that we do welcome and encourage participation. If you do want to speak on an item, please make sure that you get a green card. They're found at the end of each aisle, and then fill that out and bring it up to the front. Applicants typically do have more time. If you just are here to speak on an item, we do request that you confine your comments to 3 minutes. All right, and now proceeding to the consent agenda. I know that we do have a card from one resident who is interested in speaking on item 6B, so we'll pull that off. Does any other council member wish to remove an item from the consent agenda?
No.
Any other members of the audience interested in removing an item from the consent agenda? All right, with the exception of item 6B, may I have a motion to approve the...
I'd like to call to your attention item number 5. On your dais is a license agreement that we've slightly modified to add indemnification for the tennis club and the golf club. And we'd like to ask the council to approve that and move the what that's in your packet.
This was the same one that was emailed, right?
What's the change?
All right.
You know,
Okay, a motion for all items except 6B.
I motion we approve all consent agenda items other than item number 6B.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. And now we'll hear item 6B. May we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. This is an item that went before the Parklands Committee on March 10th, 2016. It was an application by Jim Dare, who is the property owner at 2312 Chelsea Road. The application sought removal of a coral tree that had been planted at the property. It came to staff's attention that the applicant had already done some significant trimming to the tree. This happened just prior to the application being submitted. And as such, we still forwarded the application to the Parklands Committee for them to review the requirement to remove the tree because it now has been determined to be an unsafe tree, but also to discuss the potential for restoration fees. And just to back up for a moment, because we have had an opportunity to discuss this with the applicant had first raised the tree to the staff attention approximately maybe 4 or 5 months ago, suggesting that the tree was unsafe, also suggesting that there may have been some issues with the sewer line. The urban forester did go out and review the tree, found no issues at that point. And so when the application was submitted in February, the urban forester was very surprised when he went out to view the property to find that approximately half of the tree had been removed. So it was a significant topping of the tree. Our understanding from the applicant is that he did that because of a fear that the tree limbs or the tree might fall on his house or fall on a car that may be parked underneath the tree. When the Parklands Committee reviewed the application, they were very concerned that a property owner had taken it into their own hands to actually do significant damage to the tree. The staff explained that the municipal code does provide an opportunity or a provision for restoration fees. And normally that would be used as a means of trying to trim the tree and manage the tree so that it can regain its health and hopefully continue to be a safe street tree. In some circumstances, however, the tree cannot be saved. And in that case, the municipal code asks for a fair market value to replace the tree. We discussed with the Parklands Committee that a fee schedule that had been developed about 15 years ago was currently used by staff, and it was significantly lower than current fair market value, but it was something that was in the record that had been previously approved by the council. A discussion ensued with the Parklands Committee where they felt that the number should be adjusted and that we should in fact be looking for a fair market value probably close to $15,000. In fact, the chairperson acknowledged that if this was in a civil court proceeding, that the restoration fees would most likely be triple that value, and that the city really did need to send a message. As a whole, the committee felt that we needed to send a message and we needed to be protective of our urban forest. At the conclusion of the meeting, the Parklands Committee did vote to require removal of the coral tree, including the stump, and find that the removal was necessary due to the actions of the applicant, and that the applicant should be required to make a payment to the tree bank in an amount that was to be determined by the director. The municipal code does not vest the Parklands Committee with the requirement to come up with the fee. That is with the staff. And again, we were using the fee schedule, which is attached to the staff report. At the time that the Parklands Committee met, we were suggesting that it would be anywhere between about $6,400 up to the $15,000 mark. So that is what the Parklands Committee had required in terms of their recommendation to be forwarded to the City Council. So I think the question for the City Council is whether or not to continue with the application of a restoration fee.
Has that amount been determined?
We have met with the applicant. It was unusual that the applicant was not present at the Parklands Committee meeting. He indicated to me when I met with him about a week ago that he was unaware that he was invited to the meeting. But we continue to have a discussion with him. The applicant was very forthright, saying that he took full responsibility for the trimming of the tree. He recognized that it did create a situation where the tree now needs to be removed. He did ask for consideration that the fee be as low as possible. So staff has taken that under advisement. We have not sent a formal letter to the applicant, but we suggested to him that we thought that the value would be probably close to $10,000. And that would include the value for the removal of the tree and then payment into the tree bank.
I got a question about that. I'm reading from the staff report that went to the Parklands Committee. This is page 17 of 96 pages. It says that the tree replacement fee chart indicates a restoration value of $6,400. Why is the city allowed to impose a fee higher than $6,400 that was adopted on that chart?
To clarify, what the staff report indicated is that if you look at the attachment, which is attachment B to the staff report, it's number 27.
Page 27?
In terms of your page, yes. And so the chart itself lists a numeric value dependent on the size of the tree that has been removed. So it measures basically the trunk of the tree, anything from an inch all the way up to above 72 inches. But if you look at the values for a 24-inch to a 36-inch box tree, it does include, or does state that the total cost would be $6,400. However, this particular tree was larger than that. It's a 36-inch to a 48-inch. So the actual number is to be determined based on market value.
Okay, that's actually page 23, my page 23, not 20.
Oh, I have a printed document, so yours may be slightly different because of it being electronic.
Okay, I see where it says, yeah, from between 36
Right.
inches and 48 inches, it's to be determined.
Right. So what we suggested was that the minimum value would be $6,400 from the staff perspective, but that was still under advisement because we were still looking at all the details associated with the damage of the tree.
Other questions? All right, Mr. Durr? You have 3 minutes. Please come to the podium.
I missed the March 10 meeting. I'm sorry about that. And I think the council need to hear the truth.
It's helpful if you
I
speak into the
very loud,
microphone.
so I don't need a microphone. Anyway, I have 2 copies here. Anybody can see. And the first page is that this is the original. Do you want to have this for the city council?
You should speak to us.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Mr. Durr, we're actually going to be the ones making the decision, so it's probably helpful if you speak to us.
Okay. The first page is the tree. If it is an ordinary tree, that's okay with me. Okay. And but there are two branches. If it fell, it's going to hit my house, and the one branch is going to hit the neighbor's house. It's about 50 feet tall, and that's on the first page. The second page is that you did not see that the tree is damaged at the root. Okay, it's already half of the base already eaten up. And the third page is that there's a big hole, basically splitting the tree into half. Okay, and if the tree fell into the Chelsea Road, it's going to hit people walking by or cars. And if the other part of the tree will hit my house, okay, or my neighbor's house, I cannot live with a 50-foot tree hanging over my neck. So about the late January, when the wind started to blow, and I say, well, I'm not going to let this thing to happen. I hired someone to cut it into half because I couldn't get a permit for it. And so a few days later, January the 30th, my neighbor's tree, 30 feet fell down on his lawn. Okay, that's the page 4. And page 5 is the same thing. You can see the wind was blowing and all that, right in the direction of where my house and my neighbor's house. So, and then, page 6 is the one that has the big tree trunk sitting on the lawn, okay? So if my tree fell on my roof, I'm gone. My wife said, hey, let's take all the pictures to make sure that the city is liable for this. I said, if we are dead, there's no, what's the point? And I have been in the city for 28 years, okay? So now page 7 is the tree that fell, and the city immediately come and chop the remaining of the tree, okay? So now the page 8 is the current of the tree, and I am saying, I'm doing good deeds for the city. I'm going to pay for all the removal costs, the stumps, and I think that is more than enough for the punishment, okay? That's what I'm doing good deeds for the city, and I should not be penalized for this, okay?
All right. Thank you. Are there
I
any
have a question.
questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
I think there might be some questions for you, if you wouldn't mind staying up there. Thank you.
Mr., is it Gim?
Yes.
Over here.
Mr. Durr,
Or Dur, Mr. over here. So when you became concerned about the tree and this potential hazard that you observed, did you ever contact anybody from the city?
I came to the city in early January or something around that time, and nobody, the city insisted, Mr. Carl insisted that it is not dangerous. But to me, a tree falling down is not whether you are an expert or so. It's like predicting earthquake. You cannot predict when it's going to fall down. My neighbor's tree, 30-feet trunk, fell down. It's a healthy tree, okay? My tree is damaged at the root, so that's why I was concerned. I feel very lucky that I cut it just a few days before my neighbor's tree fell.
But you did contact someone from the city?
I didn't contact. I tried to get hold of a cow, and I came to the city. I even went to the archery and presented these pictures. Everybody was sympathetic, but hey, that's my problem, okay? So
you're saying someone in the city, I'm over here, sir? So someone in the city told you that it was your problem? Is that what you're telling me?
well, that's the expression that I got, okay?
Okay.
Because I cannot get a permit to cut it, okay? So,
Okay.
but I cannot live with a 50-foot tree hanging over my roof, okay? I think if you live in the house like that, you will say, this is a very sick tree.
Okay. Any other questions?
I do. Mr. Durden, just to clarify, and I want to understand, you're saying the city forester did advise you in January that his opinion, the city's opinion, was that this tree was safe and healthy?
Well,
Did he give you that advice?
well, in the meeting on March the 14th with Kyle and the city and Sherry, is it Sherry? Yeah, and I understood that they're not going to give me a permit to cut the tree.
But he did advise you that, in his opinion, the tree was safe.
Excuse me?
He did advise you that it was his opinion the tree
Yes.
was safe.
But to me, my neck is on the line.
Understood. I'm just trying to understand.
I don't want to take the risk.
Mr. I know. I just was trying to understand the facts. You
Okay.
were advised of that, and did you actually make an application for a permit to cut the tree?
Yeah, I came in after I cut it in half, and then the neighbor's tree fell. And then I say, I need to get a permit. I came back in early February and applied for a permit, and I'm willing to pay for all the costs to remove the tree.
If I could just clarify one point, you said that you cut it, and then you determined that you needed a permit. Is that right?
Yeah, I cut it because I felt very nervous that the tree is going to fall because the wind was blowing so hard.
Okay, but you didn't apply for a permit before you cut it.
I tried to apply for the permit. I came in earlier than before I cut it, but I couldn't get a permit.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Durr.
All right.
Can I clarify that further? So you came in on March 14th to request
meeting.
to have a permit,
No, I
No.
came in to meet
just speak to
Sharon
them.
and Carl.
And Carl, to let them know that your tree is unsafe, right?
No, that's already done.
You had already
cut
the tree
you had
down.
already
It's
cut
already
it
done.
This
at
is
that
after the
point.
fact.
That was in January when you
I
came over
understand.
and
Yes.
talked to them.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
In January, I think January the 23rd, I have the tree cut into half.
Okay.
January 31st, my neighbor's tree fell. Okay, and then a few days later, I came in early February. I applied for a permit to remove the rest of the tree.
I see.
And-
So you didn't ask before you cut the branches, you didn't?
I did
apply
not
for it.
ask. I apologize for that, but I was thinking that maybe the city doesn't have the money to cut the tree or whatever, and so I just say,
Okay.
I am not risking my life for this.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No.
All right. We appreciate your comments.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mr. Durr.
Thank you. I think perhaps our planning director can clarify the chronology here for us.
To clarify the chronology, I'm not sure when the first time was that Mr. Dare had conversations with Mr. Moritz, who's our urban forester, but there were at least 2 times that there were conversations and inspections done of the property. One of the conversations related to sewer issues. The applicant had indicated that a sewer line was being blocked. The urban forester advised that possibly sleeving the sewer could be helpful. I believe the applicant ultimately did that, and that did help resolve some of the issues. There was also another request where the applicant called the urban forester and said that there was a dead tree and he wanted it taken care of. The urban forester did go out and only saw the coral tree, did not find any dead tree on the property. The urban forester believed that the tree was healthy and that it was safe. Coral trees often do have unusual characteristics, and I think that's what the applicant is referring to, but that doesn't mean that the tree is unsafe. The urban forester, as I think most of the council members and the community is aware, he is very protective. He's always looking for conditions that may indicate that there is a safety issue, and if so, he does take immediate action. So he saw nothing to suggest that this tree was an issue. When we received the application, there was nothing to suggest that the tree had already been trimmed. If you look at the application submitted by the applicant, he's actually, in his own handwriting, acknowledged what his concerns and fears were. He indicates on the photograph that shows the mature tree, in his words, dangerous to fall on home in 2015. The next one is on January 31st, cut off so tree cannot fall on home. So he was, again, very forthright in his application, but when both staff and the Parklands Committee saw the condition of the tree, it was not trimmed, it was not cut by someone who has experience as a D49 licensed contractor, meaning that they specialize in trees. This appears to have been done by a landscape contractor who simply came and did very rough cuts on the tree itself. And so you can see that there are splits. The tree was not gracefully cut in any way. And if it were allowed to regrow at this point, the types of small suckers that would grow out would ultimately be very unsafe, especially on a coral tree.
Can I ask you, if the tree hadn't been trimmed or butchered, in my view, would the tree have been removed?
It certainly would not have been staff's recommendation because it was not considered to be an unsafe tree. Normally, the Parklands Committee has a number of factors that they focus on, one being view, another one being safety. They also consider the neighborhood character. In this particular situation, it does not appear that there was a view issue, nor does there appear to be a safety issue.
And just to clarify for the benefit of the audience and those watching at home, if someone does feel that there is an unsafe street tree near their property, they should call the city and the city will come out and inspect it and make a determination.
Absolutely, and that's actually an excellent question because we do get calls all the time from residents. You know, if they're fearful about a tree, especially like the large eucalyptus, when we had the windstorm, we had lots of calls. You know, we will go out, we'll send our urban forester, who is a certified individual, has specialized training, and we will make a determination if there's an unsafe condition. If it's immediately unsafe, we don't wait, we will take action. If it's something that is not really a significant safety issue, we can advise a property owner to make application through the Parklands Committee. And in some cases, they will have trees removed because of safety issues. But they are not eminent safety issues that we would consider to have, you know, threat to life and limb. We'd always encourage individuals to consult with the city because when you take it into your own hands and you trim trees, it is not uncommon for landscape contractors to not necessarily be as thoughtful when they're doing trimming. The city has very specific requirements. We do require a D49 licensed contractor. We will issue a no-fee permit if someone is interested in doing trimming, and we will also provide some consultation to make sure that it's done in a way that doesn't damage the tree.
All right, thank you. Council, what do we think about the Parkland Committee's decision?
I'll start. So what the issue here in my mind is if anybody, despite Mr. Durr's best of intentions, if anybody believes that a tree, of which we have many in the city, is in imminent danger, but without any knowledge about that, other than their own concerns, without any justification, they try to contact the city and that doesn't work, and they go and cut down the tree, we could have a lot of trees cut down, and that would be problematic for sure. So I think we have a process that follows that. The forester looked at the tree, said it was fine. I look at the picture of the tree. I'm not a forester, but it didn't seem like anything was hanging over. I mean, clearly there was lawn below it and the street, but not anything that was in imminent danger. There's a lot of trees in the parkland that look more severe than this. I think we have to go with what the Parklands Committee recommended.
Thank you.
I definitely agree with that. As much as I feel and that you might have lucked out on actually cutting the tree and not having the wind blow, I think there's a process that needs to be followed. And it's important for you to, and anybody that wants to trim the tree, to actually come to the city first and let them determine that if it's safe or not. So I would have to agree with Councilmember Goodhart. I almost say Mayor Goodhart.
No, I agree as well. I do understand that that Mr. Durr had a sincere belief about the safety of this tree. That's not an issue, but he really wasn't qualified to make the determination that that tree wasn't safe. The city, on the other hand, that's our business. We have qualified personnel to do that, and we have a process that any resident can follow if they don't agree with the forester's determination. So I just can't let people do self-help and cut down trees just because they have a sincere belief about it. So I support the determination of the parkland.
I've got nothing to add. I agree with what's been said. I think they've said everything that I would have said myself.
I do feel the same, and I do agree. I'm sure Mr. Durr was acting in good faith to the extent that he did have a reasonable fear, but at the same time, I think he knew it was a city tree, and there are processes that we have to follow. So I do agree with what the Parklands Committee did as well. So I'll take a motion to approve that action.
Well, I have a question. Is it a motion to approve it or just to receive and file?
We
It's a
approve
consent-
it.
Yeah, we
Recommendation.
consent.
This is a recommendation from the Parklands Committee, so the council's asked to approve it.
Yeah, we approve it.
Okay, so I move to approve the Parklands Committee recommendation.
Second?
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Next is communications from the public, and these are items that are not otherwise on the agenda and on which we cannot take action. I do have a card from Brian Cochran.
Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you for letting me speak. My name is Brian Cochran, and my family and I reside at 429 Via Media. We've been there for a dozen years and went through the planning commission before we built our home 15 years ago, and were unanimous in our consent to remodel our home. The reason I'm here today is to reinstate some comments I made a week ago at the planning commission. We, our family, oppose a property at 429 Via Media based on its non-conformance with neighborhood compatibility statute 18.36.030. Intent of my comments here now are twofold. Number one, I believe that the commissioners of the City of Palos Verdes Estates have a very special duty to disclose potential conflicts of interest. The proposed home at 429 Via Media, 2 homes removed from our own, belongs to a family of Commissioner Wade Welch. His participation as a commissioner on the Planning Commission was not disclosed prior to the night of his presentation, or the Planning Commission presentation to the community. Unfortunately, Commissioner Welch's participation on the Planning Commission, in our opinion, is colored by his own goals for a McMansion on Via Media. Commissioner Welch is using his position of authority for a platform to push his own personal agenda to the detriment of the neighborhood. We recommend that the City of Palos Verdes Estates and its commissioners be transparent. Clearly, this wasn't the case with Commissioner Welch and or the city. At no time was it disclosed in any city documents, nor Commissioner Welch's submittals to the neighbors in the 300-foot radius, that he was on the presentation. I'm sorry, that he was on the commission. We believe that Commissioner Welch's actions are a violation of good faith and fair dealing to the community. They're also not consistent with the values of the City of Palos Verdes Estates that call for honesty and integrity, respect for those we serve and each other, teamwork, exceptional and responsive service, effective communications, a safe community and work environment, and a responsible use of resources. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Cochran. I also have a card from Camille Feldman.
Good evening, council members and also the staff. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight. I am here specifically to talk about safety and also the cell towers that are being placed throughout Palos Verdes Estates. I was here 2 weeks ago, and I was raving about how fantastic the ordinance was that had just been enacted in RPV. First, I'd like to talk about safety. Crown Castle, who is installing these cell towers, that had dug a hole that's about 2 feet wide and about 8 feet deep near my home on the corner of Chiswick and Chelsea. It's only covered with a flimsy piece of plywood. This hole was dug before Christmas, which means that there's a clear safety hazard, particularly for the small children that live in my neighborhood. I'm not only concerned about the resident safety, but also wonder about the financial liability for the city. My husband and I would like to know what the city's process is for this type of a dangerous condition. And secondly, I would like to comment on the communications that are going on, because we were only made aware of the 17-foot cell tower that was planned because of a traffic safety meeting. After more inquiry with my neighbor, who happens to be the president of the Lanada Bay Homeowners Association, he assured me that this couldn't be happening, that Lanada Bay couldn't be having 24 new cell towers going in, or he would have known about it, and he was going to contact our city manager and discuss it. A week later, I spoke to him again and found out that indeed it had been planned for months. So I have in my hands 2 magnificently beautiful newsletters from the city. Each one of them, one is the year in review from winter and one's from spring that I just received. They're beautifully written, but I would like to know why the city of PVE never was notified that this was an issue. I do understand that it's up to Crown Castle, the installer, to let the residents know, but I think in a community like Palos Verdes Estates, it's important that we get this information out. I understand that we can only have an impact or a say as a resident in the time, place, and manner of where these sites go in. And if that's true, then it's incumbent for us to at least know that this is an issue beforehand, before they get the models up. That's way too late in the game to have any say-so. I did contact the Planning Commission. They've been trying very, very hard to be helpful in giving the residents on my street and block information, and I made a public request for information. So they've been very helpful, but they've also told me that the application was not complete. So as residents, we couldn't make comments about the environment or the impact. So I am here to ask if we could have better communication.
Could you please wrap up?
Okay, yes, I will.
Thank you.
And if we could also have an attorney who represents the citizens in the neighborhoods and our needs and wants. I know that the Planning Commission has somebody working with them who's good technically with cell towers. He also believes that having a cell tower in your neighborhood and on your site absolutely has no impact on your property values. So please consider that and consider putting it on the agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Feldman. Well, we can't take action on that. I will let you know that I see that staff was taking notes regarding your safety concern, and so I'm sure that that will be explored. And I know that we are in the process of developing more thorough notice procedures, as you've said, with your work with the Planning Commission. Again, a lot of this is out of our hands and dictated by federal law, so we are doing what we can within our limited discretion that remains. Thank you. I also have a card from Gerard Harnick that does not have an item number on it, so I don't know if you intended to speak during this period.
Gerhard Harnack at 444 Via Alma. I just wanted to voice my concern about the neighborhood compatibility that survives. In the last planning committee meeting, it sounded like there might be a problem. So would you please pay attention to what develops? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda, we did switch the agenda, so it will be item 9, consideration to support AB 1745, Hadley, the badge funding bill. It's budget allocation for drug and gang enforcement. May we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Council. AB 1745 has been introduced by local Assembly Member David Hadley, representing District 66. It proposes $85 million from the state's general fund for supplemental law enforcement services. If approved, the funds would be available to local law enforcement agencies for what's called frontline law enforcement services. That's defined as including drug interdiction, anti-gang, community crime prevention, and juvenile justice programs. The city, as you said, is being asked to send a letter in support of this legislation. If the legislation is approved, it would double the city's current allocation of funds from the state by $100,000. Funds would be available to the city and would be used for such things as body and car cameras. In your packet, you'll notice that the League of California Cities, to which we belong, has taken a watch position because the funding is substantially above what the California police chiefs have requested, and the League has been working very closely with the governor's office and wants to be cautious about getting ahead of the governor and the Cal Chiefs Association. That concludes staff's report, and we're asking the council for direction on this letter.
Thank you. Questions for staff?
I will add that Tom Brewer from Assemblymember Hadley's office is in the audience if there are questions. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Brewer, since I'd like to
Do you
hear
have any
from Mr.
remarks?
Brewer.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll open the public hearing.
Madam Mayor and City Council members, thank you for taking this item out of order. I'm here to answer any questions that you might have about the bill. We feel that $85 million per year is adequate because of the decreased funding that's coming from the state of California and also from the federal government cutting the federal funds from asset forfeiture. So we felt $85 million was the adequate sum to put forth.
So, if I may, thanks for coming tonight. So can you comment on the city manager's observation from the League of California Cities that they're concerned about the Police Chiefs Association and in this number? I don't know if Assemblymember Hadley has talked to them, trying to gain some equitable amount of change or the same number, or are they at odds with one another? Could you talk about that?
We've talked to some of the local police chiefs and feel that the sum that we have is adequate. We realize that the Cal Chiefs are a little bit different with that, but I think from some of the off-record conversations that we've had with the group, I think we can come to some consensus. If it's not going to be $85 million, it might be less, but we feel, and some of them feel as well, that $85 million is the correct sum to put forth.
So what happens now? I mean, has it gone? It hasn't gone before the legislature yet.
Well, what's happening now is these bills, the bills that are introduced in the state of California, are now starting to go to committees, and our bill is going before the Appropriations Committee from the Assembly. So that's the first hearing we're going to have, and that will happen probably within the next week or so.
So then what? I mean, does it?
And if it goes through the committee, it goes through a variety of committees before it finally gets to the floor of the Assembly. If it gets through the Appropriations Committee, they may direct it to go someplace else. If it passes that, they may just direct it to go to the floor of the Assembly. It depends on where the committees assign the bill. So if it passes through that, it may just go to the floor of the Assembly and be heard at the Assembly level.
So you're seeking all the cities in Assemblymember Hadley's district to write a letter of support to gain support in those committees, I trust?
Yes, that's right. The City of Torrance has already voted to support the bill, and we're going before all the city councils in the 66th district to get their support as well.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right. Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
We'll close the public hearing.
So
What are our thoughts?
I'll start. So I think a lot of this, and our police chief can probably chime in if he desires, but he's spoken on this subject a number of times. The AB 109 was passed by the Assembly for early release of prisoners, and Proposition 47 passed last November, addressed changing a number of felonies to misdemeanors. Consequently, a lot of people who may be convicted of a misdemeanor show up to go to jail and then they're released. And so it's hard to make a direct connection to crime related to that, but a lot of those people released create crime. So I think the notion here from Assemblymember Hadley is to provide our police department with the resources to enable to be more efficient. And I think we've talked about cameras on our officers as well as cameras at the cities. We're talking with the Sheriff's Department and to try to come up, and I think we've actually established 44 locations across the peninsula where we would install cameras. So if we can get more money to accommodate that, I think that's a good thing. So that would be my thought.
Thank you.
Well, I agree. I think it would be nice to get additional funding to make up for the additional crime that's being caused by the state of California turning loose prisoners. And the proposition you mentioned, Mr. Goodhart, retroactively reduced felonies to misdemeanors, and so people who were in state prison convicted of felonies all of a sudden were entitled to release. And so the state of California seems to be reversing the three strikes law a little bit at a time that had put the bad guys behind bars and had caused our crime rate to drop. The crime rate's now going back up as they let these people out. I think this measure by Assemblyman Hadley would help in some measure to give us some tools to protect our community. So I'm in favor of signing this letter.
I'm in favor as well. Even if we don't get $85 million, if we get some, still a plus. So definitely.
I'm in favor of the letter. To quote, local law enforcement programs have to contend with limited funding, an upward trend in crime, and increasing reliance on and need for new technologies for policing. I think that says it all, and I think it's a good letter. It should go out.
I can support the letter as well. I was a little concerned by the League of California Cities watch position, but it doesn't seem to me that we're losing anything anywhere else, which was my primary concern. So I can support it as well. We need a motion for this? All right. May I have a motion?
I move to direct the mayor to sign the letter in support of AB 1725.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Now we'll go back to item number 8. This is a public hearing and an appeal of Planning Commission approval of NC 1543 G-1560 M-1064 M-1065-15 neighborhood compatibility grading and miscellaneous applications for a new single-family residence located at 709 Via Samonte. May we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. We have with us our city planner, Elizabeth Corpus, who's going to be presenting the staff report for you this evening, and we'll both be available to answer questions.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. This project consists of a new single-family residence. The application proposes a 1,511 square foot first floor, a 1,127 square foot second floor, and a 400 square foot garage. The total floor area is 3,038 square feet, and the total gross floor area is 3,422 square feet. The total grading proposed on the site is 1,599 cubic yards. The project also proposes walls exceeding 3.5 feet within the front setback, and also non-standard encroachments in the city right-of-way, which consist of steps and garden walls. The slide on the projector is a section of the residence. It should be noted that the first floor does meet the technical definition for a basement. And you can see on the bottom floor, it's a garage. On the first floor, it's living space. And on the upper floor, it's also living space.
Can you give us that definition for the benefit of everyone here, please?
Sure. So the basement, by definition, means the lowest level of a building that is not more than 6 feet above natural grade for at least 50% of the basement perimeter and does not exceed 12 feet above grade at any point. The slide above shows the street view, front elevation of the proposed residence. It should be noted that the garage ceiling height is 9.7 feet. The first floor ceiling height is 7.9 feet, and the second floor ceiling height is 8 feet. Regarding the Planning Commission's review of the project, it was reviewed at the Planning Commission at multiple meetings. First at the October 20th, 2015 meeting, the December 15th, 2015 meeting, and also the January 19, 2015 meeting. At those meetings, concerns were raised regarding the view impacts, massing, privacy, and the floor area ratios. And as a result, the project was continued. Most recently, the Planning Commission heard this item at the February 16th meeting. The Planning Commission decided to approve the proposed project subject to standard conditions, subject to additional conditions that were recommended by staff, and then they also added 2 additional conditions. The first condition is that the overall ridge height of the residence be reduced by 1 foot, and the second condition is that the landscaping shall not exceed the height of the roof ridge line. On March 2nd, 2016, an appeal application was submitted by Jeffrey Parker, the attorney for the property owners. This slide provides a summary of the appeal. The appellant is appealing the conditions of approval specific to the requirement that the overall ridge height be reduced by 1 foot, and the condition that requires a landscaping not to exceed the roof ridge line. The appellant indicates that the conditions would destroy the standing view from the main level of the proposed residence, would require spending significantly more in grading and retaining wall construction cost, would depress the structure into a significantly deeper retaining wall hole, would create drainage problems, and would restrict the vegetation higher than 5 to 7 feet. The appeal also asked the City Council to consider a building height of 20.8 feet, which was presented at the January Planning Commission meeting. There are several alternatives available to the Council. The first is to confirm the Planning Commission's decision to approve the applications as conditioned. The second is to confirm the Planning Commission's decision to approve the applications with modifications. The third is to overturn the Planning Commission's decision and deny the application. And the fourth is to return the applications to the Planning Commission with direction. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions for staff?
I have a question about the building height. The February application, according to the chart I have here, the building height is shown as 19.8 feet. Is that right? Correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And the silhouettes that's on the property right now, that reflects that 19.8 foot height.
That is correct.
Okay. The 20.8 foot height was the January application. And when the Planning Commission said to reduce it by 1 foot, what they were saying was reduce it from 19.8 feet to 18.8 feet. So in other words, looking at the silhouette on the property, the Planning Commission approved a structure 1 foot shorter than the poles that are out there now, whereas the appellant and the applicant, or one and the same, is asking for us to approve a structure that's 1 foot higher than the flats that are out there now.
That is
Does that
correct.
sum it up? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So, thanks for including this. Could you go to the last page on this, where it has the site sections? There you go, thanks. I just want, of course, you probably can't see it from there. So what I see here is, with the subject residence, the first floor elevation is 109.33 feet. And so the assertion by Mr. Parker in his letter is that standing height from the main level, I got to get it here, destroy the view from the main level of the proposed residence. So if I look at this, the floor level of the main floor is 109.33, and so if I look across the street, site section 2, the highest roof ridge height is 110.15. So, yeah, there's a little less than a foot. And so, but directly across the street, the, doesn't have an address, oh yeah, 708 Via Samonte, that ridge height is 108.5, which is lower. And the applicant's residence certainly before was maybe 2.5 or 3 feet higher than that, than what it is now. But I kind of don't understand the standing height, because even if they're standing and if the floor levels are a little bit one way or the other, they're still going to be able to see across those homes to the north and actually observe the Queen's Necklace view and maybe some of the beach, depending on what's going on there. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm not sure that statement in Mr. Parker's letter is accurate. That concludes my question.
Other questions for staff?
Not now.
I had one more question, if you don't mind. But, with respect to the issue of grading, as I understand the Planning Commission's direction, they didn't direct that there be more grading under the garage. If the garage plate is 9.7 feet, that could be reduced by a foot, and no further grading would be required, and so the garage wouldn't be pushed down below the level of the street. It would be as shown on the plans, just with a ceiling plate 1 foot lower.
That is correct. The Planning Commission did not stipulate how the applicant would gain the 1 feet or the 1 foot. It is assumed that the applicant most likely will lower the garage plate, which will in turn lower the first floor even further into the property.
Right. Thank you.
All right, we'll open the public hearing. Typically, in an appeal, we give the applicant 5 minutes to speak, and then people who are interested in speaking on the project have 3 minutes, and then the applicant has 5 minutes in rebuttal. I do not have a card from the applicant.
I apologize, Your Honor. I didn't know that I had to submit the card. I thought I'd be speaking.
That's all right. If you could just do it at the conclusion of your remarks, that would be helpful.
I take it this is the PowerPoint? And I'll just say next. Thank you. Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council, I thank you for your service, and I especially thank you on behalf of the applicants for your visiting the property. The appellants are 20-year residents of 709 Via Samonte, and they seek to remodel their 65-year-old one-story home as a two-story by increasing the ridgeline only 5.8 feet higher than the existing 15-foot one-story ridgeline. The Planning Commission approved the project only if applicants dug themselves far enough further below ground to create an 18.8-foot ridgeline, a mere 3.8 feet higher than the existing ridgeline. Appellants are here because they refuse to believe neighborhood compatibility mandates they live in a cave. Appellants are supported by their neighbors who feel their right to build their own two-story homes will be jeopardized by the Commission's decision. I'll proceed through most of appellant's PowerPoint now, reserving slides 16, 17, and 20 for closing. Should I exceed the 5 minutes in my opening, I hope that I can have that time be taken off my closing. I'll try to keep it to 5 minutes. As you can see, Via Samonte winds uphill from Via Del Monte. The shaded area is the lot in question. What shows as a vacant lot 2 houses up the street is now fully built, and the Bonner's property, 793 Via Samonte, is directly below the shaded area. Next slide. Here are 3 of the multi-level homes heading up the street from 709 on the same side of the street. 717 is next door to 709. 777 is the vacant lot in the aerial. Next slide. Some of the homes on the uphill side of Upper Via Samonte after the curve in the road. Next slide. The existing two-story homes on appellant's same side of the street in Lower Villasamonte approach the maximum 30-foot allowable ridge height. 717, next door to appellants, has a 20-foot ridge line without the first floor sunk below ground. Next slide. 777, the vacant lot in the aerial shot, and the next two-story up from appellants right after the Kinney property, has a 28-foot ridge line. Next slide. 773, next door to 777, has a 33-foot ridge line. Next slide. 769, next door to 773, has a 37-foot ridge line. Next slide. And 763, next door to 769, has a 31-foot ridge line. These homes are part of the neighborhood compatibility in question. Next slide. Appellants seek an allowable ridge height of 20.8 feet achieved with much of the first floor below natural grade. Next slide. The outline of the proposed structure is superimposed over the shaded area existing structure. Unfortunately, the elevation for the ridge line here should read 130.75 feet instead of the 129.75 feet shown. The average 300-foot radius square footage for appellant is 2,800 square feet. They seek to increase their existing 1,900 square foot one-story home by only 700 square feet to 2,600 square feet. And even more conservatively, as previously mentioned, they seek to increase the existing 15-foot one-story ridgeline by only 5.8 more feet. Next slide. In order to achieve such a small increase in ridge height, appellants need to grade 1,600 cubic yards of earth and export more than 900 cubic yards, as previously mentioned. The dark orange highlights the additional cut and fill required. The light orange highlights how much the existing structure already is below grade, and both shades of orange highlight how much of the proposed structure is below grade. The deed in CC&R is entitled two-story construction at 709, but with so much below grade, the first story qualifies as a basement, as already mentioned by staff, making the project essentially a one-story on top of the entry-level basement. Note that the backyard is higher than the floor of the second story, starting at 3 feet higher, ascending to 66 feet. Next slide. The existing structure has retaining walls merely 5 feet away and nearly the height of the eaves. Next slide. The computer-generated images better show how much the proposed first story is below grade. Next slide. The image on the left shows the proposed project. The other images are versions presented before the last 3 Planning Commission hearings. The next slide, the top outline with the chimneys, the roof line and height presented at neighborhood meetings. The top of the light gray is the 25-foot height presented at the October Planning Commission meeting. The top of the dark gray is a 22.9-foot height presented at the December meeting. The top of the black section is a 20.8-foot height presented at the January meeting, and what appellant hopes the council will approve. The bottom of the black section is a 19.8-foot height presented at the February meeting. The dotted line just below the bottom of the black section represents the 18.8-foot ridgeline the Planning Commission approved.
Would you like to use some of your 5-minute rebuttal time now?
If I may, and I'll try to keep it very brief. Can I skip to slide 18? As shown here, this is the view from the appellant's existing first story. There's no privacy issues concerning peering into the neighboring homes across the street. And finally, slide 19, the next one. These are views submitted by the bonders in advance of the January Planning Commission when the project was flagged at the 20.8-foot height requested. The pictures focus only on the project. They do not show the bonders' expansive view to the right and left, and they show the project has no impact on the Queen's Necklace view and affects only a small portion of their sand and water view. Thank you.
I had a question.
Thank you.
Jennifer,
You'll have 4.5 minutes.
I had a question.
Sure.
Could we go to the slide that shows the contour of the land? The one that you had like dark brown and lighter brown would be a good one.
I'm sorry that didn't come out as the orange it did in my printer.
Well, our orange. Oh, there it is. So the line that you have superimposed to show the contour of the land, where is that? Because in my view, an inspection of the property, it's a compound contour going from southeast to northwest. And so is that in the middle of the lot? Is that on the east side of the lot, or is that on the west side of the lot?
That's an average of the uphill and downhill?
So it's sort of in the median.
That's I'm told by
Fair enough.
the
Okay.
owner that
All right.
it's
So
median.
clearly, if you go to the east, it's more in To the west, it's less.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Could I ask
Other-
for clarification on a point? I thought I read your letter, your appeal is saying that you wanted us to approve the 20.8-foot height, and I thought I just heard you say that you wanted us to approve the 19.8-foot height. So can you just clarify
Oh,
that
if
for us,
I
please?
said that, then I'm sorry, my fee won't be paid. I apologize. No, we're
wanted to-
seeking, as was pointed out, an approval of a height 1 foot higher than currently flagged, the 20.8.
Okay,
So what is that in total elevation, so we're all clear here, using this slide? Is that, we have a,
That would be 130.75. If you look at
Okay.
the elevation, it's
Elevation
129.75. This unfortunately was the design submitted in advance of the February hearing. There is in the packet the design submitted in advance of January with the 130.75 number.
so this is what was approved by the Planning Commission and recommended for approval?
Well, the Planning Commission wants it lowered to 128.75.
Oh, 128,
The Planning Commission conditioned approval on 1 foot decrease
okay, thank you.
of the 19.8.
Is there any other way to get that ridge line down by a foot besides reducing the height of the garage?
Not seriously. I mean, 7-foot ceilings? No, there is not. By reducing the garage, the first floor goes down. The first floor going down means that all the digging on the sides of the house has to occur and results in more excavation, more of a hole, more of a cave.
Okay. And throughout this process, I do recognize that there have been some design changes, but what you were showing us up there, the design has remained substantially the same throughout several iterations. I'm just wondering whether any consideration was given during the process to redesigning the project to avoid a lot of these issues.
Well, the designs that the Planning Commission found so outrageous at the outset were, I'm informed by the appellant, the joy of the art jury. I mean, those designs were presented to the art jury. Those designs were changed to accommodate the Planning Commission, and I mean, the pitch of the roof is pretty minimal at this point.
Okay.
A follow-up question?
I'm talking about more than just roof pitch. I mean, a thorough redesign of the project.
To
Was any
create a
consideration-
two-story home that's only 3 feet, 4 foot higher than a one-story home, is that what we're talking
Well,
about?
if that's the desire for the project,
I just, given the height of most Americans and the nature of a two-story, I just don't see how you can erect a two-story home on this property without, by only going up 3 or 4 feet as the Planning Commission desires, without digging a big, big hole.
okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. If anybody else comes.
All right. Thank you very much.
So I have a question.
Oh, you do?
I
I'm
do,
sorry.
sorry.
Okay.
So following up on the plate heights, so there was a reduction in the top floor. I think the end result was that they're all about 8 feet. In fact, I think the first floor is a little less. It's like 7-11 or something like that. But the garage, in the discussions at both the January and the February meeting, there's a lot of comments about the garage plate height. And I appreciate the grading impact, but it wasn't really clear to me in the discussion from the applicant that if you lowered the garage plate height, the whole structure would come down. Admittedly, there would be more grading required to accommodate those 2 floors to come down, but that would still leave an 8-foot plate for the garage, or 8 plus, and then similarly 8 feet for the other 2 floors. Is that achievable? I think it was, and that would accommodate what the Planning Commission recommended, I think. What's your view?
Whether the garage floor remains at the same height and you lower the ceiling, the first floor has to come down.
Right.
Meaning at the sides, the back and sides, where most of the excavation is,
There's more
all
grading.
that has to occur,
Sure.
which means you're staring up even farther into the sky from way down when you open the first floor and step out and see your walled enclosure right there. And if you look at the pictures we showed of the backyard starts at a height several feet, 3 feet above the rear balcony of the second floor. So it is, if you look at balancing here, if you look at whether there's even a significant view impact to begin with, and what the Planning Commission guidelines, the Neighborhood Compatibility Application guidelines say, I question whether even the initial threshold is met where these kind of modifications should have been considered. As we'll point out later, if you look at the way that there's only one property owner that's pointing to a reason, and that's the Bonner's view impact. If you look at the way their home's constructed, if you look at their view, this isn't going to be a problem, and a serious problem for long once that home gets rebuilt eventually.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We have several speakers for this. What I'm going to do is call one name, and then I will call a second name. And I would appreciate it if you would come sit on what we call the on-deck chair, so then we can make the hearing go just a little bit faster. And again, everybody has 3 minutes to speak. And please do keep in mind that I know several of you whose names I see here have already submitted letters or emails to us. Please be assured that we've already read those letters and emails, so you don't need to repeat what you said in writing to us. The first speaker is Richard Bonner, to be followed by Elaine Bonner.
Honorable Mayor, I'd just like to confirm that public notice was given for this public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Council members, for allowing me to address this issue. My name is Rick Bonner, and I live with my family at 793 directly behind the applicant. We've heard several times that the reason the applicant can't reduce their ridge height by excavating down is that they would lose their view from the first floor, and they would like to maintain views from both the first and the second story. Achieving this objective would come at a sacrifice to significant parts of precious views of the neighbors immediately behind me. We appreciate the applicant's right to build a second story, and we accept that we will lose our view from the first story. However, it is the views of the whitewater that we would like to protect. Now I'd like to address the next chart, please. I think there's been a misrepresentation of the grading, and I'd like to go into some detail here. There have been repeated arguments by the applicant that the conditions imposed by the Planning Commission would put his home in a hole. The lot slopes in two directions, as was noted by one of the council members. It's a compound lot. It slopes downhill from northeast and northeast to southwest, and down from south to north. A permit was pulled by the applicant in June of 2015 to perform block wall replacement and patio improvements. What we witnessed, in spite of the efforts to tarp off and obstruct the view, was that the project actually removed a 3-foot retaining wall and replaced it with a 6-foot 6-inch retaining wall, and then backfilled subsequently with dirt to give the impression of a much more shallow lot, much more shallow grading. Tracings from the existing plans at the Homes Associations several months ago documented this existing condition, and we maintain that the existing structure is not as deep in a hole as depicted by the applicant's drawings. In fact, if you understand that the lot slopes from one side to the other as well as up to down, there is no way that the lines depicted here could be a median lot natural grade line is shown. In fact, the lot immediately to the west of the property is actually below the current elevation of this house. So it stands to reason that the lines drawn and depicted are not accurate. I would also maintain that after that applicant had done the block wall replacement, again 3-foot to 6-foot 6, backfilled, then had a survey done, which now provides the documentation that comes in with this planning package to show what I maintain is an erroneous original elevation. Now, I won't go into all the details of the options that we had identified from prominent architects of how to reduce the height from the existing ridgeline to a more reasonable ridgeline without impacting the size of the house, because you've seen those in our applications. But I also want to note that during the course of the last couple years, the trees have grown significantly higher. In planning, I suspect that to block the silhouetting and allow us not to show the impact that it actually has. I implore you to support your planning commission and their original decision.
Thank you,
very
Mr.
much for your
Bonner.
time.
I have a question of Mr. Bonner. Can I
Sure.
ask him? I'd like to ask you about the landscaping condition, because the landscaping condition imposed by the Planning Commission as a condition of approval was that the landscaping shall not exceed the height of the roof ridge line.
Right. And I think that we expressed in our letters that was a misunderstanding. We understand because of the slope of the lot that it's unreasonable to keep the height of their vegetation to an absolute elevation of the ridgeline. What we're looking for is a reduction to a sight line from our deck over the ridgeline, which would then allow those trees to grow to a reasonable level to provide privacy for them. They have a balcony in the back, which I'm sure they don't want to look into our yard, and neither do we want to look into their balcony. But from a seated position on our deck, looking over their ridge, if the trees were kept to that level, we think that would be a reasonable accommodation to provide privacy for them as well as privacy for us and protection of the view.
So in terms of how that might be enforceable or describable, you don't want to see their roof? Would that be how you would, from a sitting position on your balcony, you would want to look down and not see their roof? You'd want it covered by foliage?
Within reason. I mean, trees. The trees. They have 5 trees there that they grow very, very fast. So one would expect that they'd be cut to some level above their balcony, and they would grow up, and they would take a repetitive amount of tree trimming if in fact the trees remain.
All right. Thank you.
Other questions? All right, Elaine Bonner to be followed by John Dixon.
Good evening. Elaine Bonner, 793 Via Samonte. My home is almost directly behind the proposed development. We've been attempting since the beginning to arrive at a reasonable compromise with the applicants. We invited them to our house back in September to see the view impact. And I've been to their house twice to talk about their plans and try to work out a compromise. We have tried to find common ground and have been reasonable. This has been a long, 4-month, drawn-out process that has been contentious as we have fought both to preserve our view and to address the unfavorable precedent this could set for the rest of our neighborhood. At the last planning meeting, we asked for an additional height reduction of 2 feet and that the applicants keep their trees trimmed. We had accepted the loss of view from our first floor, but we're willing to support the project with these conditions added, although there would still be an impact on us from our main viewing floor. The planning commissioners have sat through 4 public hearings and studied the issue extensively, weighing the owner's right to build with neighborhood compatibility. Each one of them visited our house to see the view impact before every one of the 4 planning meetings, so that's a total of 20 visits. Each commissioner spent many hours of their time on this before voting. One point I would like to make is about the interest that our neighbors on Via Samonte have shown in opposition to this proposed new development. All of them are concerned about the precedent this could set in regards to view blockage and massing. There are a few neighbors who have supported this project, and I reached out to all my neighbors on Upper and Lower Samonte, inviting them to come to my house and see the flags from our main viewing area, and none of the neighbors who signed the applicant's letter of support saw the impact from my home. Also, the applicant has accused us of submitting misleading photos, and I'll just say we have submitted photos at various planning meetings of our view from various parts of our deck, and also submitted photos from downstairs as well. Although we were hoping for a 2-foot height reduction, we respect the vote of the Planning Commission and support the project as accepted with a 1-foot reduction in height and trees kept trimmed to ridgeline. We are hoping for a final conclusion tonight with a vote to deny this appeal. Thank you for your service to our community, and thank you for the time you have spent reviewing this appeal.
Thank you, Ms. Bonner. John Dixon to be followed by Fred Gregory.
Yes, I'm John Dixon at 641 Via Del Monte. 86 years in the area, 40 years in the estates, and active in historic preservation of the estates. I work with John Flood, Mike Moody, Ruth Graylow, and Bill Feiner developing the neighborhood compatibility rules, and I wanted them to be more specific and less subjective. But their argument was that it could be handled by the Planning Commission, and for individual pieces of property, the attorney showed some of these others, and I think a lot of the arguments were disingenuous. These 4 houses, when they were approved at this ridgeline in order to preserve the views of the houses above them on Samani. So this breaks it out. Now, they said that this was part of the neighbors supporting this so they could build 2 stories. Well, if this is approved, it would set a precedent for all those houses below those contiguous to this one to go up. The first proposal was so outrageous that it would probably have been rejected. At least some of the commissioners would have rejected, except for Mr. Welch, who's already been discussed by Mr. Cochran, and he's the one that kept this thing going, with the vested interest. Well, that I don't think is in the is what Palos Verdes Estates or what these people expected when we drew up the neighborhood planning or neighborhood compatibility rules. And the other thing was, he said that, oh, you can only do that. He's a professional. And by realigning, his complaint was it was too expensive. He couldn't afford it. He's just building his little home for himself, and he couldn't afford to do it where it would not impact the view. But the original one was so outrageous, the design was not compatible with PV. And I think it's just been a case of a developer trying to get this going, and then the neighbors will build it, and then you'll have a different situation there. But I think this is a perfect example of what the neighborhood planning or neighborhood compatibility was all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Fred Gregory, to be followed by R.L. Denon. And just very briefly, now that we've had a couple of comments questioning Mr. Welch's integrity, I was going to let it go, but we've had a couple of comments now, and we've selected him for the Planning Commission. We have no question about his integrity and his judgment, and I'm sure he was divorcing himself from any personal projects that he had going on when he was deciding this project. He will not vote on his own project. That comes before the Planning Commission, and so I just wanted to clarify the record in that regard. Thank you, Mr. Gregory.
Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity. I object to the process of coming in, buying a small house on a small lot, tearing it down, and cramming something else in there. They're in an established neighborhood. It's well developed, it's mature. To come in and tear down a house that's perfectly good and cram in something and crowd it in is against neighborhood compatibility per se, in my view. But now look at what they've done and what they have to do in order to comply with neighborhood compatibility. They have to dig a hole. And that's wrong too. They shouldn't have to, people shouldn't have to live in a hole in order to have neighborhood compatibility. So what's the answer? What do you do? How do you solve the problem? You deny the application, period. That's one of your options, as I understand it. Just deny the application and come in with a whole new project if they really want to build on this property. If they wanted to build another project on a different lot, like the ones they show on Upper Samonte, they could have bought those lots and built on those lots. But they didn't. They kept their small lot, and now they want to cram a big house into it. So the Upper Samonte problems that they see are all bigger lots. They don't have the view impact, But now they have to, but here they want to take a small lot and impact the views behind them. That's a precedent. Speaking of precedent, appearance of impropriety is a serious problem. Whether Mr. Welch is able to divorce himself from these decisions and divorce himself from his own project, that's something in his head. The appearance of impropriety is that he's trying to set a precedent that will help him with his project. And he's consistently said that the view impact is not important. And that's consistent with where he is on his project. So it's an appearance of impropriety. I'm not saying that he didn't divorce himself and think of them in different ways, but it's an appearance. And he should not touch this project if it goes back to the Planning Commission. And I would ask that he be disqualified from further consideration of any project that involves the same issues that are involved in his project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. It's helpful for you to provide both your name and address. The next speaker is R.L. Denon, to be followed by Jim Kinney.
Richard Denon, 813 Via Samonte. My wife and Teal and I have lived for many years. Before I remarked, I was noting some of the comments originally by the proposal. That was interesting. The applicant complained that the restriction that were being placed on him would restrict his view. I thought that was an interesting comment. But thank you for listening to me, and thank you for the Planning Commission. They've been wrestling with this problem for quite some time. But we understand a reasonable conclusion was reached by the Planning Commission. And the Boehners have bent over backwards to understand and to comply and consider all of the additions below them. Apparently, the property owners have chosen not to be reasonable, but to pursue their own special interest. And we, as longtime residents of Palos Verdes, believe that neighborhood compatibility is straightforward and an honest criteria for neighborhood who wish to be neighbors. We believe the Planning Commission has some soul searching to do if any one member truly believes that the views are not a key priority in Palos Verdes Estates. We adamantly support the Boehners in their reasonable desire to hold down the proposed structure. And personally, I find it offensive to suggest that Teal and I have been orchestrated in any way. If any of you know Teal, one should know better than to suggest that Teal can be manipulated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Denon. Jim Kinney, to be followed by Derek Lazaro.
Good evening, members of the council. My name is Jim Kinney. I live at 721 Via Samonte, 4 houses away from the proposed project. I have been to 2 of the Planning Commission meetings regarding this structure and the improvements they wish to make. And both times I was very impressed with the way the Planning Commission told the applicants what they needed to do in order to get approval of their remodel or rebuild, whichever it is. I think that is the right way to go. I think that is a very positive, wonderful set of circumstances that the Planning Commission put forward. My one concern is that at each meeting of the Planning Commission, the applicants were given suggestions as to what needed to be done. And in the applicant's mind, they have fulfilled the requests that the Planning Commission had given them, only to come back a month later to see that there have been some changes. Height changes, size changes, depth changes, and I think that is not the best way to work with neighborhood compatibility. I would really like to see that the changes that have been made are somehow recognized. And I haven't seen their plans. I have no idea what it's all about. But I think there's some area there for compromise. I think there's some area there where well-meaning people can get together and come up with a plan that is good for the applicant, good for our street, and I've lived there now for 46 years. It's a wonderful, wonderful spot. And I think working cooperatively, everybody's best interest will be served. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Kinney. Derek Lazaro, to be followed by Albro Lundy.
Derek Lazaro, I live at 804 Via Samonte. I'd like to begin by thanking the Planning Commission. I attended all but one of the meetings regarding this proposal, and it was very apparent to me that by and large, the commissioners have paid tremendous attention to detail and due process. Regarding this project, I'd like to paraphrase Commission Chair Michael Thomas. He said, "This was one of the 3 most impactful proposals he has seen in his years on the Commission." Let me repeat that. This was one of the 3 most impactful proposals he has seen in his years on the Commission. In my own opinion, this proposal represents an attempt by one resident of Via Samonte to dramatically improve his own view and property value while diminishing and destroying the views and property values of surrounding neighbors. During the Planning Commission process, the applicant repeatedly came back to the meetings not with an innovative redesign and compromise, but with small tweaks and an apparent unwillingness to consider options such as further significant grading and reductions to the garage height. It was only the diligent and thoughtful work of the Planning Commission that brought this proposal to a reasonable height and a reasonable degree of impact. And now the applicant is seeking to undo that careful work. I have stood on the front deck of the applicant's home, and I have stood on the second floor deck of the Bonners. Even with the final approved version of this proposal, there remains a significant impact on the view of the Bonners. Even with the latest design, I am certain that the applicant will have a wonderful view from both his first floor and his second floor. As a homeowner on Via Samonte, I can tell you that a number of homes are currently for sale or otherwise on the market on Via Samonte. I am terribly worried that this project will create a domino effect and an arms race that will harm both property values and community relations on Via Samonte and in Malaga Cove more broadly. I therefore urge you to reject this appeal and support the decision, which was truly carefully considered, I believe, by the Planning Commission. I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Lazaro. Albro Lundy, to be followed by John Bartlett.
Hi, good evening. Albro Lundy, 1701 Via Ariba, and actually represent the Bonners in this situation. Pretty much everything's been said that I wanted to say. I wanted to highlight just a couple things. One, that the Planning Commission gave it a very good look over and over again. And at the last Planning Commission, basically we're looking for the best, most reasonably practicable way to preserve the neighborhood compatibility and also to allow the applicant to get his home built. As Councilmember Goodhart said, reducing the level of the garage plate by 1 foot was a very reasonable and I thought excellent suggestion to finally make this happen. The Bonners don't want to see this home not built. They want to make sure that their neighbors do get a chance to specifically build what they'd like to have as their dream home. They just want to see a reasonable compromise, and we felt that the Planning Commission did exactly that. And so in looking at this, we wouldn't want to deny the project entirely. What we'd like to do is approve the project as conditioned by the Planning Commission itself. Another thing is that grading is impactful, but in terms of evaluating and trying to come up with a compromise, it's happened a lot now in the recent history of the city that we're asking the home builders to go lower to preserve and lower the height. And I think that, again, is reasonable, and the grading itself is not over burdensome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lundy. John Bartlett, to be followed by Cynthia Bartlett.
Thank you. John Bartlett, 416 Via Media in Lower Malaga Cove. We moved here about 5 years ago from Manhattan Beach, and we did a couple of remodels there in Manhattan Beach, and there is no planning commission forum in Manhattan Beach for remodels. And I like the term that Derek used, because that's what's happened in Manhattan Beach, Hermosa Beach, and Redondo Beach. There's become an arms race. And we really are concerned about that happening in Palos Verdes. For the sake of full disclosure, we're currently dealing with an issue on Via Media where we have a view obstruction issue, and we're working through that with the Planning Commission now. Been very impressed on how well informed the Planning Commission is doing with this issue, and we're looking forward to going through the process. I also want to thank all of you for your service to the citizens of Palos Verdes Estates. So here are my 3 points, and I'll try to keep it short. We would like you to reject the appeal of 709 Via Samonte. Number 2, we'd like to keep the neighborhood compatibility ordinance strong. A lot of people have spoken on that already. I'm not going to belabor that point. And point number 3, as much as I loved living in Manhattan Beach for 15 years and raising our kids there, we moved to Palos Verdes because it's not Manhattan Beach. Okay, and that's not a negative comment. It's just the facts. And a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about. I like that term's arms race, and I'm concerned it's going to happen here. So here are my points, and hopefully I'll be done early. We hope the NCO is not diminished. People have said that. Number 2, we are concerned of the negative impact that a precedent will be started at 709 Via Samonte, the issue that we're dealing with, and others. You do not want that arms race up here. Palos Verdes Estates could lose its charm and its soul. And we moved up here because of the charm and the soul of Palos Verdes Estates. And last but certainly not least, home investment values are at stake here also. If you lose your view, you lose your value. A lot of citizens up here that have lived here a very long time, for decades, this is part of their retirement plans. And the last thing you want to do is have citizens that have lived here for decades have their home values diminished. I don't want mine diminished, and I've only lived here 5 years, and it could have a major negative impact on our home. So let me just wrap up by saying, reject this appeal, keep the NCO strong, and Derek, I love your term, let's not start an arms race in PVE. Let's keep the soul pure. Let's save the soul of Palos Verdes Estates. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Cynthia Bartlett, to be followed by Jerry Brook, and that Mr. Brook's card is the last card I have on this item, so if there's anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak, please bring a card forward at this time.
Hi, my name's Cynthia Bartlett. Thank you all for your service. We certainly appreciate it. I live at 416 Via Media, and although I'm not directly affected by this particular project on Via Samonte, I'm definitely indirectly affected by means of a potential dangerous precedent being set. In fact, we're facing a similar scenario, or a nightmare as I should call it, with a neighbor who appears to have no respect for the spirit of the neighborhood compatibility ordinance, designed to mitigate potential animosity with guidelines for how to be compatible with neighbors through architectural or building changes. I would like to see the spirit of the neighborhood compatibility ordinance designed to protect our community from being like the architecturally competitive cities of Manhattan and Hermosa. Sorry to be repetitive. We didn't compare notes. Where your house and view and value could be devastated if your neighbor gets greedy. In this light, I suggest that you reject the appeal at 709 Via Samonte, as the spirit of this appeal is not to preserve the unique character and high standards for development, but is motivated by greed with no regard for the neighbors or their views, as well as the neighborhood compatibility ordinance. Please deny this appeal and show that respecting our neighbors overshadows greed and the ominous precedent it sets. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bartlett. Jerry Brook.
Jerry Brook, 812 Via Samonte.
So here we are to address the applicant's appeal of his February approval, barely passed and with conditions that he wasn't satisfied with. He was thwarted initially in October, again in December and January. Now he wants to go back to a prior application. Why not go back to his original plans with an elevator shaft shooting skywards and a rooftop deck? All along, he has presented applications that have been oversized and inappropriate for this small lot. The applicant has consistently played the role of the victim, whereas it is he who is victimizing nearby residents. He always uses his second 5-minute rebuttal to make untruthful statements when the public does not have the opportunity to respond, such as working all along with impacted residents. Not true. During this time, he shows homes on the upside of Upper Semanti, including mine, as examples with their height, but fails to mention these homes have absolutely no impact on the views of homes above them. He claims the Bonners conspired against him by having residents sign a petition against his application. Of course, when you're going to be impacted or are concerned this would set a precedent, you are going to be against it. I might add, they went around with their petition at the same time. This application would set a terrible precedent for Malaga Cove. As seen in the March 12th real estate supplement of the Daily Breeze featuring Malaga Cove, realtor Kim Hall states, "Spectacular ocean views. To impact the views of others just to create a better view for yourself is simply wrong. We do not want to see the character of Malaga Cove destroyed and turn it into another Manhattan Beach." Just to bring you to your attention, at the first Planning Commission meeting for this application, newly appointed Commissioner Hunter chose to lecture residents that were opposed and told us that the Neighborhood Compatibility Ordinance does not protect existing views of other residents. This shows his total disregard of a most important aspect that this ordinance provides and clearly exposes his mindset. And we also have newly appointed Commissioner Welch, who has always shown himself in favor of this application, and here he is with his family house wanting to build up and block the views of others as presented at the Planning Commission meeting of March 15th. Unfortunately, the 709 applicant has had a self-centered attitude throughout this process and has not handled himself in a manner that reflects neighborhood compatibility, and we ask the City Council to exercise your power to deny this appeal and send a message that our neighborhood compatibility ordinance means just what it states, and it is an ordinance that guides us in maintaining the quality of life we know and love in Palos Verdes Estates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brook. All right, is there anyone else besides the applicant who's interested in speaking on this? All right, we'll hear the applicant for 4.5 minutes in rebuttal. I think it was 4:15.
I'm going to start the clock at 4 minutes because I don't have a 30
Thank you.
second.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. If I can go back then to slide 16, or that was the cross sections, page 64 of the. And I think one of the city councilmen pointed out the impact on view of my client's first story, looking at the height of the home across the street compared to looking down at section 3, the height of the Bonner's home. If I could also take a look then at slide number 18. There's no question that, as proposed, even without going down the 2 feet additional the Planning Commission proposed at 20.8 feet, this view is going to be reduced by 3 feet. In doing that, the ocean is going to be barely visible above the homes across the street. Now I want to take a look, if I may, at slide number 20, the last one, to point out that the Bonner residence, while it has a garage on the street, itself is, as shown again on slide 16 before, which you saw, somewhat down the hill. Next door to the Bonners is 797 Via Samonte on the market, which advertises proposed remodeling plans with the structure relocated up at the street height to maximize view without impairing the view of uphill neighbors across the street. But most importantly, I think we get to the view guidelines, or not the view guidelines. They're not the view guidelines. They are the neighborhood compatibility application guidelines. And the question is whether view is even a consideration. If we can look at slide number 19, the one right before that. And in particular, I like the picture the Bonners took of their balcony railing, which, given that the balcony railing is in the picture, already shows that this is being taken at a reduced height than what normal 5'6" viewing is. You can see, if you look at the silhouette as proposed by the applicants, again, this was prior to the January meeting, none of the Queen's Necklace view is impacted. And if you look at what portion of the sand and water is impacted, and then imagine the fullness of this view, stretching out all the way on the one side, all the way on the other. Indeed, if you could capture on a picture the entirety of this view and then graph it to see what percentage of the view is being impacted by this plan, the question becomes whether, under the view neighborhood compatibility application guidelines, this is a significant impact in the first place. As Mr. Lundy, the Bonner's attorney himself, has said in a Planning Commission hearing last week, it's reasonable to interpret the guidelines such that there is no view issue to consider if the proposed development is not of an unreasonable height or substantially blocking existing structures. Now, we have an applicant who is proposing only a small two-story home in an area where 2 stories are not prohibited. Thank you very much.
I've got a couple of questions for Mr. Parker, if you don't mind, sir. Can you go back to slide 17? I think it's 17. No, that wasn't it. It was.
Oh, thank you so much.
It was the view from the.
You reminded me.
No, you reminded me. I do need to show you slide 17. I do need to. The art jury made a change.
That wasn't
slide
the slide
17.
I was thinking of. Sorry.
I don't know if I could have the 20 seconds I didn't use for slide 17. When you,
That's
well,
fine.
I asked about slide 17. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
20 seconds.
Slide 17 is not this one. It's the. It's after that, a couple of slides. It's the art jury correction comment. Oh, that is it. I'm sorry. Okay. The art jury made a. They have recently approved the latest design with one minor comment. Either there be more roof stepping at the front of the house, or the roof be one continuous slope with no stepping. Since more stepping would increase the ridge height, appellants have opted for the continuous slope with no stepping and seek council approval of this minor design change.
Okay. I was looking for the slide that showed the photograph from the applicant's first floor balcony.
That's the next one, slide 18.
Okay, slide 18. That's taken from the existing first floor, and you're saying that the view from here would be 3 feet lower, but that's the first floor. The second floor view, though, is above that.
Of course. It is going up, so
then,
yes, the view in the bedroom quarters will be better.
Now, we have to make 4 findings in order to approve the application. The view finding is that the proposed development is designed and will be developed in a manner to the extent reasonably practicable, so it does not unreasonably interfere with the neighbor's existing views. Your client came in February with an application showing a ridge height of 19.8 feet, and here your appeal is asking us for something a foot higher. How can we possibly say that a 20.8 foot high roof, which is blocking an existing Queen's Necklace view, is reasonable when your application for February was a foot lower?
Again, if you
doesn't
look,
seem possible.
But if you look at the picture that we're using, because we've been denied access to take our own pictures at the Bonner's home, but if you look at slide number 19, it does not block the Queen's Necklace view. The Queen's Necklace view, as I understand it, is the lights you see at night, and no portion of the lighted area by the beach is impacted by the proposed roof line.
Doesn't the February application admit that your request for a 20.8 foot high building is not reducing the property to the extent reasonably practicable to protect the views? It seems to be, by definition, 1 foot too high.
Under the pressure applicant was receiving, you have to appreciate that each time applicant came before the Planning Commission, in good faith acting on the guidance they thought they'd received before, they were told it wasn't enough, you've got to go further and further. Again, despite the neighborhood compatibility application guidelines that say it's not the number of people in the neighborhood who oppose it that matters, it seemed that was very much the case. And each time, given the opposition that continues to be mounted from way outside the neighborhood, I might add, the body in question took stock of that. And I'm asking the council to take a look at the neighborhood compatibility application guidelines to see if we're dealing with, in the first place, a significant view impairment. And then, reasonably and practicable, given how little bit of this view is going to be impacted, we now have to impose hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional grading on my client. Or, in the views of some people in the neighborhood, tell the one-story homeowner on Lower Via Samonte that building a two-story home is out of the question.
Okay, I think you answered my question. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
All right, thank you, Mr. Parker.
Thank you very much.
We'll close the public hearing.
I had a question of staff,
Okay.
if I may. And I forgot to ask this question earlier. The topic of the basement and the categorization of this, I think the current first level as a basement, is this on that street, maybe to narrow it down, is this the only house on that street that may have that same condition where the first floor is a basement? Or is there, is it elsewhere in the city? And is that really a negative? I don't know the implication of a basement, what that implies.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, we have not done a full evaluation of all of the properties, but by looking at many of them, they're actually stepping down the slope of the hill. So it doesn't appear that a significant number or really any significant property is built into the hillside. That's just not what's been necessary for most of the homes to be
So
developed.
that's probably unique to this lot.
I think it is relatively unique to this property.
Okay, and then across the street, so the north side of Lower Via Samonte, those homes, and as an example, the house directly across the street, I'm not sure what the number is, but it's a one level, but is it a two level? And then similarly, there's a house below it, or a part of the house on that street below it?
That is correct. The Homes Association actually allows for 2.5 stories for those homes that are on that side of the street, which is the lower side of Via Samonte. So typically what you see is on the street level, it appears to be 1 story, but it in fact drops down. And so you can have another story below, which qualifies as the first story. And then even below that, you can have a half story, which is similar to a small basement.
But going the other end, if it's 2.5 stories, could that house in the future go up a half a story?
Yes, under the city's municipal code, it certainly could. And then it would be the subject of neighborhood compatibility to determine whether that was appropriate.
Okay, thanks.
A quick question of
Sure.
staff as well. I've looked at all the elevations. I'm understanding that the express difference in the existing ridge height and the proposed is about 5 feet. Am I getting that correct? The applicant is saying less than 4, but how much is this ridge height going up? And particularly what I'm looking at is when I looked at the silhouettes, when I look at the pictures, for example, on page 13 of the staff report, it just looks like it's a lot more, and I just like a little explanation of what's happening with that.
Councilmember Vandiver, if you go to sheet A03 on your plans, the existing elevation of the existing ridge is 124.17. And as shown in the February plans at 129.75, that would be about 5.5 feet higher than the existing ridge line.
Okay, and the approved then would be 4.5.
That is correct. I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah.
Okay, but if you look at the picture on page 13 of the staff report, there's some illusion going on there. It just looks like it's so much higher. If you don't have a ready explanation, not terribly important. I wanted to be sure I understood the, for the elevations, it's 5.6.
Right, we would just comment that sometimes when you look at photographs, it is difficult to get perception.
I had the same perception when I was out there, though. That's what I'm really trying to understand. Okay.
Just a little bit different question. That area that's designated as a crawl space, is it correct to assume that that is not calculated as part of the floor area for the floor area ratio?
That's correct.
Okay.
Nor the gross floor area.
Right. Okay. Anyone else? All right.
I do have a question with, about the landscaping condition.
Oh,
it's written in the way it was written, and I don't know if I can find it here, but it was limiting the landscaping to the ridge height. But I don't know if that was the intent of the Planning Commission. I mean, was that their intent to have it all the way down like that, or was it their intent for the landscaping to be at a height that it would essentially block the owner's view of the roof below?
Right, Councilman Ray, it was the way that it was stated, but I agree with you. I think their intent was more from the view perspective from the Bonner's property, because otherwise the landscaping has to be trimmed very severely, and I don't think that was their intent.
Would there be a way to describe a more reasonable landscaping condition?
Yes, I believe if we included some language that associated the view corridor from the upper level properties so that the view was still maintained possibly to the very upper edge of the ridge, that the landscaping could grow within that area and not present a problem.
It sounds kind of difficult.
It sounds hard to enforce.
Well, let me try. Well, it's going to be difficult.
Either way.
But I think
Yes.
I think maybe the line would be drawn from the Bonner's residence, the upper the elevation of their second deck at 140.5. If you draw a line down to the ridge height of the property, the northern side at 129.75, that line is probably what they're talking about. So you're going from 140.5 to 129.75. Now, how you actually enforce that's kind of tricky, but that would be the way to describe it, I think.
Staff would agree.
If I understood Mr. Bonner.
That's correct. But we also recognize that it is difficult to enforce. Anytime you have private landscape conditions that need to be enforced by the city, it is difficult to actually be able to ascertain the height of the plantings without having some type of survey done.
So it reminds me, though, and maybe the Homes Association can help, because the next door, I think if everybody looked, well, maybe we're in the wrong discussion here. We're still in the question, or are we in the top?
No.
Okay. So the Homes Association with the neighbors next door, there were pine trees, and that residence is 789 Via Samonte. There are pine trees growing, and they're trimmed nicely so that you can see through them. And as I understood it from Mr. Bonner, that was an agreement between neighbors that they would maintain that. So maybe a similar arrangement, and I'm not sure what the Homes Association does in that regard, but that's kind of the agreement that you would execute between neighbors, because that's private property, right?
That is correct. So there's several ways that could be done. It could either be done through the Homes Association. It could also be done through a private agreement between the two property owners without involving the Homes Association or the city, or it could be done through a condition of approval.
Okay.
But if it's a condition, then it's a code enforcement issue. Is that correct?
That is correct. Ultimately, if the bonders felt that the applicant was not in compliance, a complaint would be made to the city. We would have to investigate.
Right. And that was the Planning Commission's intent in conditioning it.
Yes.
All right. Are we ready to decide? Sure. Do you want to start?
Sure. I'm inclined to approve the action of the Planning Commission. I know the applicant feels like he's had a difficult time with this, but the truth of the matter is, and one of our speakers said it very well, the problem is you're putting a very large house on a very small lot, and I think that creates a great challenge, and it's just the applicant's challenge to work his way through that. The appearance of the house is still a three-story appearance, and that looks very big for the neighborhood, so I think the Planning Commission could certainly have been taking into account massing. The FAR of over 40% is at the outer edge on this. So my inclination is to uphold the Planning Commission as to their decision to reduce the height by the additional foot. I would modify the landscaping condition, however. I think a landscaping condition is a good idea in this circumstance, but I would try to do it in a way that does not overly impact the trees that are there.